بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين. نبدأ الآن the first session بالconference. Before that, I would like to welcome all to the first International Sustainable Infrastructure Conference under the title Challenges in Developing Sustainable Infrastructure Conference. In this session, we have two keynote speakers. Organizers, نبي شوية تنظيم. We have two keynote speakers, Professor Ali Maher and Dr. Khalid Mehdi. The first speaker is Professor Ali Maher. Professor Maher is the director of the Center for Advanced Infrastructure and Transportation and the Professor of Civil and Environmental Engineering at Rutgers University. Under his leadership since 1998, the center has successfully completed 3 times to maintain its status as a Tier 1 university transportation center, a network of international recognized research and education organizations that are a vital source for the professionals and leaders needed to meet our transportation needs now and in the future. The UTC program is an initiative of the U.S. Department of Transportation Research and Innovative Technology Administration. The title of the presentation is Transportation Infrastructure Asset Management and Resilience, U.S. State of Practice. I would like to welcome Professor Mahal to start his presentation. You have
Thank you, Dr. Kamal, for a kind introduction, and good morning, everyone. Before I start my presentation, I would like to take this opportunity to acknowledge and thank basically the steering committees, the scientific and the organizing committee, and especially my colleagues at Kuwait University, Professor Al-Rukaibi and Professor Abdullah, for their initiative in organizing a conference on such a timely topic, which is particularly relevant to the economic health and well-being of Kuwait and other countries in the region. I had the opportunity to be somewhat involved in the initial planning discussions of the conference, acting as the liaison and coordinator with the Transportation Research Board in Washington. I'm happy to say that the conference has the full support and endorsement of TRB, and indeed TRB considers the topic of this conference a priority and in line with addressing global challenges in transportation infrastructure, sustainability, and resilience. As we all know, organizing a conference of this magnitude is no trivial matter, and it takes tremendous logistics and coordination. So once again, I congratulate the scientific and organizing committees, Professor Amani and Professor Rahal, and all their wonderful colleagues for their diligence and excellent work. Yeah, sure. Sure. So going back to the topic of discussion, infrastructure asset management and resilience essentially are multifaceted topics of global dimension. While most solutions are ultimately based on local criteria and conditions, the methods and tools are common among most practitioners. And we can learn from each other's experience and exchange of ideas in gatherings such as this. So I'm sure through this conference and other similar events and activities, Kuwait University and Kuwaiti engineers and planners will play an important role in advancing the understanding of regional infrastructure challenges and identifying solutions to address them. The focus of my talk this morning is primarily on the state of infrastructure asset management and resilience in the US. I will provide a brief background on the elements that form a transportation asset management plan or TAMP, with focus on recent developments in the US, discuss the state of implementation of legislation by US Congress, review some of the latest developments in condition assessment and decision support tools, and finally discuss some of our recent works in my institution, our research center, on infrastructure resilience, particularly after the big events that we had in the US in the last few years. It goes without saying that a healthy and functioning transportation infrastructure is the foundation of our economy and the quality of life of our citizens. The dependability and the resiliency of the system creates a sense of confidence and forms an important part of our national identity and strategic purpose. Moreover, the system functions as the engine for economic growth and development, and also frames our way of life and enables us to enjoy a higher standard of living. In addition to economic growth, the expenditure to build, operate, preserve, and improve transportation infrastructure are essential to meeting national goals for social welfare, domestic security, environmental protection, and emergency preparedness. At the global level, as we know, from now through 2030, the world will need to spend at least $57 trillion to build the power plants, ports, rails, roads, telecommunications, water systems, and other infrastructure that the global economy requires. In the Gulf region, the macroeconomic picture has improved significantly across GCC in 2018. Increased oil production and a more benign fiscal environment has translated into improved GDP growth. Total value of active infrastructure projects has surged to $1.14 trillion, with transportation systems among the highest number of projects. Kuwait Vision 2035, we will hear about that a little bit later. For example, plans for improved infrastructure among all sectors, with more than $5 billion in key road projects and more than $100 billion in urban development requiring significant transportation investment. Now, considering that the average age of transportation infrastructure in the region are less than half of those in developed economies such as those in the US, the problem of maintaining state of good repair will soon be a priority here, if not already. The main challenge that we are facing in the US, for example, or most developed countries, is how to renew aging and dilapidated infrastructure while at the same time addressing needs for maintenance backlogs. To provide a point of reference, I'm showing a slide behind me, a summary of US transportation infrastructure inventory of assets. The US has the largest multimodal transportation infrastructure system in the world. It carries roughly about $10 trillion in goods, roughly about 60% of its GDP. The state of good repair of these critical systems pose many challenging problems and what most agencies in the US are grappling with. Furthermore, all economic indices project significant higher demand on a system that is already under stress and needs to create capacity through better asset management. In 2017, the American Society of Civil Engineers, ASCE, gave US infrastructure an overall grade of D+ in its 2017 report card. The report highlighted the fact that our infrastructure is aging, it's deteriorating, and we are relying on a system which was built more than a century ago to meet the needs of a completely changed socioeconomics. As I indicated before, our immediate challenge is how to deal with the problem of deferred maintenance, where currently we are spending only 2.5% of our GDP annually to maintain and modernize our assets. Regardless of the country you are coming from, deferred maintenance is a burden on your economy, and ultimately will hit your citizens in the pocketbook. American Society of Civil Engineers, for example, estimates that if the problem is not addressed, the average American household will lose about $3,400 in disposable income every year from 2016 to 2025 because of inadequate and unreliable infrastructure. I'm sure everyone here agrees that maintenance is not glamorous. In fact, it is time-consuming and sometimes tedious, and not nearly as exciting as cutting ribbons on new projects. I usually show this analogy of the iceberg, where in general, only 30% of total life cycle cost of a project is for capital, initial capital needed to build the project. But the operational cost and future capital costs take a much bigger chunk of the life cycle cost later on. Now, the challenge is if we let these assets to deteriorate, the cost of both operation and reconstruction increases significantly. Nick Garamo from McKinsey argues that we would want to schedule maintenance often enough to avoid dilapidation and breakdowns, and to do it at the right times with minimum disruptions. The World Bank Group estimates that, for example, if the African nations had spent $12 billion on road maintenance in the 1990s, this would have led to savings of $40 billion in reconstruction costs today. While most problems of closing maintenance gaps seem to be insurmountable, there is, however, progress being made in the US at the federal and state levels to address the challenge. Fixing the infrastructure has historically been one of those few issues that politicians from both sides of the House in the US have agreed on. Currently, there are 50 pieces of infrastructure legislation in Congress, US Congress, including a few bipartisan efforts to close some of the funding gaps. Along efforts to secure more funding and improvement to close the current gaps, there have been significant progress at both the federal and state levels to implement a data-driven asset management system to achieve infrastructure state of good repair. So remember this word, the data-driven asset management. We will be using this throughout this discussion here today. By utilizing more infrastructure asset management concepts, the decision makers can best use the limited resources available to them to manage assets in a way that responds to agency goals and objectives. Some of the key advantages of robust transportation asset management, or TAM, are more efficiency in decision making, lower or longer, I should say, life expectancy of the assets, improved accountability, and reduction in failure risk of critical assets. In the last 10 years, we have had two pieces of legislation in the US. First one is Moving Ahead for Progress in the 21st Century, and the acronym is MAP21. And the second one is Fixing America's Surface Transportation Act, with the acronym FAST Act. Both of these have mandated state departments of transportation to develop and implement asset management plans, or TAMPs, with the objective of improving and preserving condition of assets and system performance at a minimum practicable cost. The FAST Act, for example, is providing roughly about $23.3 billion a year for the National Highway Performance Program, which will support achieving performance targets established by each individual state. Now, this program has a deadline on it. All the states, all the 50 states, have to complete their TAMP analysis and implementation by the July of this year, 2019. Last year, however, in 2018, Federal Highway Administration in the US performed a review of those states who were working on their TAMPs. And they basically engaged 26 states with the goal of assisting state DOTs in enhancing their initial risk-based TAMP plans, and 2, identifying best practices among the states that were working in this area, and then use those best practices to help the states that need improvement through additional guidance. The TAMP review program showed that the states that were under study, they have basically overall a good understanding of asset management through this exercise. They look for return on investment through the implementation of TAM, and they have incorporated life cycle strategies in their TAMP system. The TAMPs are clearly, through this exercise, showed them their condition gaps and the models that they use for deterioration and remaining service life of their assets essentially showed also the outcome of decisions that they make today, future outcome of decisions they make today. And within these systems, the risks were also acknowledged. In this case, you can see one state showed $150,000 saving per bridge per year by implementing an asset management approach rather than fix it first or worst case scenario first approach. Another state showed that by life cycle planning implementation, they could reduce maintenance backlog by 53% compared to worst case scenario first approach. US DOT and Federal Highway Administration, these are some, I'm showing a few resources that became available to the states before the implementation of the legislation and after the implementation of the legislation. So these are all resources that you can have access to. They are free to download. But what I want to show here is that after 2015, the FAST Act, there was an emphasis on inclusion of risk-based and resiliency and sustainability into TAMP system. So that is really the key take for evaluation of TAMP programs after 2015. Now, let's switch gear here a little bit and talk about what a TAMP process is. So forgive me if I go through some of the basics here, but I think it's important so we will be on the same page. In this case, we basically examine the key components of a TAMP system by reviewing platforms that we recently, at my institution, developed for Federal Highway Administration, and a list of some of the commercial on-cam systems available in the market. The first consideration in developing a TAMP plan, number one step is to have a clearly defined mission and organization-wide strategic goal and objective. For example, what should be the priorities for repairs, resource allocation, and budgeting? How can we achieve the most effective maintenance strategy to ensure that performance is consistent with design specifications? Now, in order to do so, you have to define and you have to develop a set of performance measures and metrics that you can measure against during the monitoring of your TAMP program. I'm showing here a typical performance measure for Michigan Department of Transportation Bridge Management System. So in this particular case, the state is so let's be resilient and address this. So in this case, you can see on this column here, the state defined these conditions and these measures as the guideline to essentially compare themselves against as they were monitoring and managing their system. So you can essentially develop your own, but this is the first step. This is one of the most important steps in essentially coming up with your expectations from your system. In practice, however, there are 5 primary system components that are involved in the development of transportation asset management system. They include asset inventory management, inspection and condition assessment, deterioration and life cycle cost analysis, maintenance management, and capital planning. An example of a bridge management system that we developed for Federal Highway Administration is presented in my next few slides to describe the process in more detail. So the first step is assessing your asset inventory. In this step, we answer some basic questions. What do I own? Where are they? What are their key attributes? This step is the foundation for a data-driven transportation asset management system. In this step, agencies need to build a digital twin of their assets, recording asset type, age, structure information, inspection summary, and others. This is a system that we have developed, so in this case, I'll show you a little video that takes you through this. But in this case, a query is made for a network of number of bridges with the same design type, with the same age. So our system essentially identifies them, brings up all the information relevant to them. So this would be a network level, sort of a data management of our assets. I'm using primarily the bridge example here because we have done a lot of work in the area of bridge management systems and bridge asset management systems. The second component is the inspection and condition assessment. So you have to essentially assess in what condition your assets are. You know, this is really where we have to be careful because the quality of this assessment, the data that you collect from your assessment, is the key component of the TAM system. As you have heard this phrase, garbage in, garbage out. So if the quality of inspection is not good enough, then outcome of your TAM system is also going to be not acceptable. So the third component is the deterioration modeling, life cycle cost analysis, and so on. The deterioration modeling in this case is built upon data from inventory and condition assessment modules. You can use statistical or machine learning techniques. With this, you can essentially predict future condition. Besides, life cycle cost analysis can be performed to evaluate total cost of constructing a project and also maintaining it. Next, the life cycle cost analysis paves the way for sequent maintenance management and capital planning. Data-driven maintenance management account for predicted infrastructure condition, the effectiveness of various repair and maintenance conditions and their impact on the overall life cycle cost analysis of the system. So what you see here, these are my pointer doesn't work here, but these are the different elements, for example, of a bridge. A typical bridge has about 120 elements. So for each element, you can develop a life cycle model or let's say a remaining service model, and then combining all of them together, optimizing your system to get essentially a life cycle cost model for the overall system. So if you make some repairs or you make some adjustments on any of these systems, you can easily see the impact on the overall life cycle cost picture of the system. Now, finally, for those of you who are making big decisions on budgeting, expenditures, and so on, the system will provide, essentially, it facilitates the agencies to address the resources needed to achieve and sustain long-term asset management objectives. This is a capital planning phase of our asset management plan. The financial and capital planning can be linked to targeted performance and condition of assets identified in the TAM system. Finally, this basically is a general framework that we have used for bridges. So the first column is your input data. They could be from sensors, they could be heuristic information, knowledge-based from experts who are working on your systems, from technicians, from repair folks. The second part is manage the data, use the data to build your deterioration models, your life cycle cost models. And then at the fourth column, you incorporate the cost data. Based on the cost data, we can then do optimization for agency and user costs, and ultimately use that final column to help the decision maker to decide how much money for what purpose should be spent on the current budget year for the project. We have been doing this approach for our state, for example, for our pavement management system. So we have developed and we are maintaining the pavement management system for the state of New Jersey using this similar approach. So let's also look into what is out there in the market, because currently there are a number of commercially available transportation asset management platforms in the market, each with its own advantages and limitations. I'm sure those of you who are involved in this business have come across them. While these platforms are powerful tools for developing and monitoring a TAMP system, their usefulness, however, depends very much on the quality of data that you feed into them. So having some level of in-house capability or expertise in your organization in maintaining a TAMP system, in my view, is essential for achieving the goals of your TAMP system. You could have good consultants, you could work with your consultants, but you really have to know what you should expect from your consultants. So that is what we have experienced in our work on asset management in the US. Now, I have a little video here. Essentially, this video shows, let me run it. This is a system that we developed for, we call it basically a bridge portal. So we have data for 600,000 bridges across the country in US in this system. We developed this system for Federal Highway Administration. So I can put a query for bridges in New York and New Jersey. I can put the design of the bridge, the age of the bridge that I'm looking for. Quickly, I can get the data. I can get a map of all the bridges that were in my query. I can then decide, for example, on the deck condition. So you can see the hot colors are basically attribute to bridges with worst deck conditions and so on. So I can do all kinds of queries and analysis this way. It's a GIS-based system. And then we can pick a given bridge. For that bridge, all the historical condition data is demonstrated. And then at the same time, the powerful part of this is that we have built this back-end interfaces where we could do condition prediction. And we can do that essentially based on stochastic models, or we can do that based on mechanistic data from the field. For example, in this case, you can see the remaining service life could be predicted with a wide range in confidence here. But if I input data from non-destructive testing on the bridge deck, I can close the gap and I can get a much more accurate picture of the remaining service life of the bridge. So this, in fact, is a precursor to the capital planning program, which will be the next module in this tool. So this is just to give you a flavor of the kinds of systems that we are working on. I don't expect you to read these slides, but these provide a list of commercially available general asset management platforms. These are general platforms. Then we have platforms for bridges, and we also have platforms for pavements. So this is just to let you know that there are all these systems out there, but again, I emphasize you need to have some in-house capability in order to engage consultants and also work on these commercially available systems. Some states in the US, for example, they have opted to develop their own customized asset management system. For example, these two are dashboards for Virginia Department of Transportation for their capital planning. So it has all the attributes of the asset management system, but they have developed it from ground up themselves. Now, one interesting development is the emerging research trust in the use of artificial intelligence to turn large volumes of big data from all sources regarding your asset network. Essentially using this data for useful predictive information that agencies can use for proactive data-driven TAM decisions. With artificial intelligence, we can seamlessly integrate context-specific domain knowledge and customized machine learning algorithms to discover new insights into the data that otherwise you would not be able to obtain using simple analytical solutions or tools. In my institution, we have been on the forefront of using AI to process and analyze big infrastructure data. In the next few slides, I'm going to give you one example of our work, which we worked with Federal Railroad Administration in the US, essentially to predict track failures and help agencies to develop their maintenance system based on these predictions. As you may know, the American railroads own a network of 140,000 miles of tracks, the largest in the world. Broken rails are leading causes of freight train derailment. To address this significant infrastructure issue, we have developed an AI-based intelligent system that is able to predict broken rail risk in a short time period in advance based on data from multiple sources. The first step here is to use the data fusion technique to cross-link receive data from various sources and build a centralized data hub for your asset to bridge the information silos between various components of the system. By the way, you will hear tomorrow from my colleague Sean Lenehan on the enterprise approach, where you incorporate all the different assets together to optimize your capital planning program. It will be an interesting talk. Now, following this step, following building this data hub, we could then build a machine learning model based on the railroad provided data. In this case, we used 80% of data for model training and 20% for blind prediction. The results of our study or of our model showed that the model well matched the empirical field data. We could then infer the relative importance of each input variable on the prediction of rail breaks. And finally, we were able to import and superpose that data on a GIS map. The hot colors essentially show where the agency or where the rail operator should expect damage on their system. Let me switch gear here. Hopefully I'm on time. So one element I want to talk about here, this is part of we do a lot of research in this area, condition assessment of infrastructure assets. As I mentioned before, the quality of data-driven transportation asset management system depends primarily on the reliability and accuracy of condition data that feeds into it. We are now witnessing a shift from mostly visual and subjective condition assessment to use of technology and automation. For example, advances in non-destructive testing and structural health monitoring are leading the way for ensuring accurate and objective assessment of bridges, roads, and other transportation assets. So what I would like to show here is this is basically the current way we do bridge inspection every 2 years in the US. So it is a very subjective visual. We use chain drag and we use hammer sounding, but mostly based on visual inspection. So it's a fairly subjective approach. While at the same time, there are technologies where you could essentially use ground penetrating radar, you could use ultrasonics, you could use basically various techniques, resistivity measurements and so on, to assess the condition of a bridge deck, for example. In the US, we spend about 50 to 85% of bridge maintenance funding on repairing bridge decks. That's basically our major cost item. Now, these technologies are out there, so what we did in my institution, we looked into those technologies, and what you see here, if this is the life cycle of a bridge deck, when you do your visual inspection, you're already at the end of the curve here. The damage is already done. But using technology, you could actually get a feel for the progression of damage within your system. so you can understand where you are located on the remaining service life. That's a very important element for asset management work later on. So what we have done in my institution, we have put all these systems together, and we have developed this robotic system that's essentially used to do bridge deck testing and analysis. This system essentially is now being used by Federal Highway Administration in the US, and a number of states are also utilizing it for their bridge management system work. What this system will give you, it will give you a three-dimensional image of your bridge deck with those hot areas are the areas where that you may have delamination, you may have corrosion happening in the steel. So this can help figuring out where you are located on the remaining service life of that particular bridge system. Again, if you are the decision maker making decision on budgeting and capital planning, you need to have that curve. And what we are trying to do is to make that curve as accurate as possible for the decision maker at the end of the day. This is a short video of the first, I would say, the first model of this system. Here we are testing a bridge in the state of Virginia. This was the original model, in fact, the initial developed model, but as I said, this has been commercialized, so it's much more sophisticated and easier to use. But you program it, you essentially create a grid, it will go by itself. And one reason we did this was because of safety, because inspectors on these roads with traffic going on was actually a work zone safety hazard. So that was one of the reasons for us to develop this system. So this invention won the 2013 ASCE's Innovation Award. We are very proud of that. Another system that we developed was what we call a thumper or targeted hits to measure performance response. This system essentially is used to quickly measure the load carrying capacity of a bridge. So it's a little video I show you. So as we drive towards the bridge, we develop a finite element model of the bridge. Then we use this modal analysis essentially by shaking the bridge and then calibrating the finite element model. Then based on that calibrated model, we can measure and we can predict the load carrying capacity of the bridge. This invention also won the 2017 Innovation Award from American Society of Civil Engineers. Recently, last year, working with our colleagues at University of Texas in Austin, we brought this system. It's called T-Rex. It's a big shaker. You have 5 minutes? Okay. So I'm way behind. So let me quickly go for it. But anyway, this was used to assess the condition of the foundation for a bridge. So if the bridge needs to be replaced, we could then decide on keeping the foundation or also replacing the foundation. So we have been pioneers in using UAS or drones. We have developed an amphibious drone. It can go underwater. It can fly up. We are using it for bridge inspection extensively. In this case, we did the infrared imaging of a bridge to look into the progression of corrosion. I'm going to skip through my SHM presentation as Dr. Ansari later on will go through this in much more detail. But there is one video I want to show. This is because we are doing a lot of work in SHM. So this is essentially will give you an idea of a system where we have a SHM portal that we developed for an 89-year-old steel bascule bridge connecting Philadelphia to New Jersey. So here we have a portal which is a video-driven visualization portal which integrates sensor data, temperature, tilt, and video images to give the owner and operator a comprehensive view of the performance and condition of this bridge. Okay, so these are some of the other bridges that we have worked on. We have some of these we have done with Professor Ansari, and he will be talking about that a little bit later. So finally, one of the, in order to understand, again, the long-term performance of these large-scale infrastructure systems, it's important to understand how they deteriorate. You know, we cannot wait 30 years to see a bridge deteriorate to develop a remaining cycle model. So what we did in my institution, we built a huge sort of a system where we fast forward deterioration, in this case, of a full-scale bridge. So in this case, you can see, I don't know what's going on with, okay. So the idea here is to figure out where we are located on the remaining service life. So if you want to do maintenance work, then you can figure out exactly how much you should spend, at what point, and what you may get in terms of additional remaining service life. So this is a quick video also I'll show you on this system. This system is currently operating. We just received a major contract from Federal Highway Administration. It's unfortunate that I cannot show it to you, but okay. Oh, okay, great. So as you can see, the bridge superstructure and deck is placed in the system. We have 2 axles, 60,000 pound traffic load. We can fluctuate the temperature, moisture, salt, and then we fast forward deterioration from 25 years to 11 months. So now you can test all kinds of materials, designs, and everything, and get a good picture of the quality of your work. In the area of pavements, my colleague Professor Wang will talk about in more detail tomorrow. But one thing I would like to show is that you are mostly familiar with falling weight deflectometers, with skid trailers, profiles, and so on. But what is now important, what is emerging, this is a project that we performed last year in New Jersey, is the use of traffic speed deflectometer and noise modulated GPR. So in this case, you can do a very quick analysis of the stiffness, layer thicknesses of your pavement, and then use this data real time and import it to your pavement asset management system work. So I think, how much time do I have? Very quickly, I just want to briefly tell you a few things about the resilience. I know I'm getting a little bit short in time, but you know, what I want to say is that our view of resilience, infrastructure resilience, is evolving from collection of discrete physical and human components, such as roads, bridges, and buildings, or ambulances, hospitals, and healthcare workers, into an ecosystem of tightly interconnected and interdependent physical, cyber, and human components. So you cannot just consider your bridge network, but rather consider a whole resilience ecosystem with that when you design for resilience. Today, planners and engineers not only have to anticipate what hazards and conditions our roads, bridges, and our lifelines must withstand, but they also have to think about the impact of new technologies, population shifts, and other trends on communities' needs. In my institution, we have been involved in development and customization of tools for better assessment and prediction of damage to infrastructure and people from both man-made and natural hazards. Our focus has been on pre-event, during event, and post-event phases of a big event, such as the recent hurricanes that we had in the US. Our approach is based on a 5-step process. In this case, we collect and acquire high-resolution site condition. Okay, good, so it's back. We can use various technologies such as UAV-borne sensing, mobile LiDAR, static LiDAR. We can use HoloLens technology for imagining, using augmented reality to imagining what you would go through during a big event. And we have done this work on several major events in the US. Right after Superstorm Sandy, we essentially, if I may show this here, oops. So we did a LiDAR scanning of the damaged air. This was right 2 days after Superstorm Sandy in 2013. So these are XYZ, highly accurate XYZ images. Then we transferred this data. We built what we call essentially a disaster, big disaster data. So with that big disaster, these are, by the way, some of the examples of projects that we have done, site assessment, collecting accurate condition data. Then we can combine that with hydrodynamic models and combination of high-resolution maps, LiDAR images, and a hydrodynamic model. Then we can predict future inundations, for example, for a given site and location. This is actually for a location in New York area that was exposed. But one of the elements that you have to also think about is what are your expectations of a resilience model? So some agencies may decide not to do anything. Others may decide to mitigate them. So that comes also into the process. I will quickly go over these and wrap my presentation up. These are some of the decision support tools that we have developed based on the big 3D disaster data. For example, we have the big 3D disaster data which we collected from doing primarily LiDAR and UAV sensing. Then we have developed this interface which will essentially a decision support tool. We can model hurricane damage and we can predict that damage on your structure. We can use it for visualization of risk and resilience. We have used it to predict impact of hurricanes on lifelines, on pipelines, for grid lines, and also for removal and management of debris. So these are some of the, I will quickly go through this, but this is the model, for example, for pipeline. So we used high-resolution maps and LiDAR. We developed a finite element model. We imported the condition of the soil, developed the effect of loads on the pipeline, and then came up essentially with a condition assessment, put that into a GIS map, and the red lines will show you what you may expect in future storms as potential damage to your system. I will quickly go through this, but this is for the debris movement. We did this right after Hurricane Sandy in New Jersey. It optimizes the path for moving debris from the affected sites, includes also the areas where the material will be deposited. I will quickly go through this. Again, this is what we did right after Hurricane Harvey in Texas. Finally, this is an interesting quote from Charles Darwin. So, be like turtles. They are the most resilient animals in the animal kingdom. So it's not the strongest that survive, nor the most intelligent, but the ones most responsive to change. One last item, this is our research institute, as Dr. Kamal mentioned earlier. We are part of the University Transportation Systems Network. We are a regional center. We include New York, New Jersey, Puerto Rico, and Virgin Islands. We do research, tech transfer, and education. It's a multimodal type of a research center. We work on road networks, highway infrastructures, ports, and rail network. These are the institutes which are part of our center. Rutgers is the lead. In New York, we have Cornell, Columbia, and University of Buffalo, in SUNY Buffalo. In New Jersey, we have Princeton, NJIT, and Rowan. These are some of our international partners. We are working closely with Department of Civil Engineering here at Kuwait University. We hope to expand that. So with that, I'm sorry about this few minutes extra, but I will end my presentation. And once again, thank you for the invitation.
Thank you, Professor Maher, for the informative presentation. We have 5 minutes. We will take few questions. Please keep it short and precise. First question, Dr. Walid, تفضل. Walid Eid.
Thank you, Dr. Maher, for this very informative speech. I have a question of two parts. Part A, you have implementing the data uh, asset management system in New Jersey for some time.
Yep.
So we'd like to know how long you have been implementing that system in New Jersey. Second part, how did that reflect on the cost of maintenance in your transportation system? It would be nice to give it in percentage-wise. Thank you.
Sure. Well, I'd rather have Sean Lanahan tomorrow address that because he's doing it for actually a very large enterprise system. But in general, from our experience, especially doing the pavement management system for our state, we have roughly about 30,000 miles of road network. And what we have essentially, I would say, understood from the performance of the system is that you can certainly bring your or close your deferred maintenance gap by roughly about 50% in the next 5 years of the implementation of the program. And another element here was that, in our case, was that it gave the decision makers a very powerful tool to convince our legislators and our, essentially folks with the money to put money into the system. So, it's very easy when you go in front of your legislation or your state Congress and show actually the impact of not doing the repair and maintenance that you are planning, and you will see how much reduction in life cycle you will get from that. So it has been both a powerful tool for communicating the need for asset maintenance to the decision makers, but at the same time, practically, the distinction is typically people want to do worst case. You wait, you sit, if something breaks down, you go and fix it. We want to move away from that. We want to have a very proactive capital planning approach where we can do maintenance so we can buy more time for systems that may not show any wear and tear now. So
how long it took you to implement that system? With a clear picture for all the road network in New Jersey.
In New Jersey, it took 5 years. Yeah.
دكتور صالح ياسين.
I just have a very brief and direct question. How much of the capital in the USA, whether on the federal or the state level, is gone for road expansion to increase, and how much is going to other forms of transportation, which is really more sustainable?
Very good question. Depending on which part of the country you come from, in the Northeast, where we have the oldest infrastructure system in the country, it costs roughly about 10 times to build new roads as opposed to somewhere in the middle of the country. And much of that extra cost is because of environmental concerns and, essentially the environmental impact issues and so on, land use restrictions and so on. So the challenge for us is getting more capacity of an existing system, using intelligent transportation systems, using more, I would say, or higher level technologies to extract more capacity. So that is the discussion for the future where you have autonomous vehicles coming in.
But you avoided the budgetary. I mean, your first couple of slides, it was some budgets. I think I missed that. Was that allocation of budget toward different modes?
That was essentially the volume of inventory. That was like how many ports we have, how much road we have, and bridges and so on. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Saleh. We have another question. I forgot to tell you. Please introduce yourself because last question. Right here, any?
Thank you, Ahmed Al-Anizi, member of the Municipality Council. When you present your system, the TAB, Transportation Asset Management, and these processes and these stages. Do you think it's viable all the time to consider every bridge as a standalone? Because sometimes the infrastructure, there is some synergy between the infrastructure itself, and this help the asset to withstand, for example, environmental effect, for example, any shocks. So considering a standalone bridge rather than considering the whole system, because the system will affect, every asset will affect the other asset.
Sure.
Yeah, for the durability of the whole infrastructure system.
Of course, I think that's what I tried to refer in my last slide, that you have all these cascading effects, which we consider for resiliency. So if something happens to your bridge, then you create a choke point. That's going to cause the supply chain and the logistics and other elements which impact people's lives. So if I understood your question correctly,
my question is sometimes the mitigation plan,
right,
not for that single bridge, it's for the whole system sometimes. You know what I mean? Yeah, to put some precautions or to redesign the whole, because there is some synergy between all these components on the system.
I think that goes back to the question of enterprise asset management, where you have all the assets, kind of you're optimizing your capital plan on the needs of all the assets together, not in a silo.
This will lead us to a master plan, actually.
Yes, of course.
In order to control
the enterprise asset. Sean will be talking about that tomorrow in more detail.
Thank you. Question, please.
Ali, you talked about some...
Can you introduce yourself, please?
Oh, Sean Lenahan with the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. Ali, you had some outstanding tools showing how maintenance can be done better. What are, and for the conference here, you've developed an excellent relationship between academia and the American Society of Civil Engineers with owners who are in the thick of building, operating, and maintaining. What do you find among the greatest challenges, and is there a magic bullet that you see in getting a great bang for the buck in the work that you do that will best serve owners of facilities that do operating and maintenance?
Well, that's the kind of question that maybe you and I, on our flight back 10 hours, we probably will be able to address. But I think the most important element for technology developers and people who are in the thick of things is to be able to communicate with the stakeholders. And that by itself is very complicated. You have to know who your stakeholders. I'm sure in your organization you have 5 different people, and the first thing they ask is, what is in it for me? So I think for us in academia and in the research community, we have to be cognizant of the fact that if I am coming to you in an agency, I have to understand what is in it for you in your position and in your issues and problems that you are dealing with. And there are, we have had some success stories in my experience, some failures on that, but that is an ongoing challenge. I think you put your finger on a very timely issue. Yeah.
Thank you. Last question. Sorry, last question. Time is over, please.
Thank you for your lecture. My name is Tariq Mufti. I'm a former consultant architect with the Council of Ministers in Kuwait. My question, to keep sustainable infrastructure, we have what we call it preventive maintenance. What's the strategy of your company or what you represent here regarding the sustainable maintenance, let's say? Is it given to a third party or put on the shoulder of the contractor, main contractor? Thank you.
That's a good point. I would say my short answer to that would be this is the decision of the agency. I think agency, in my view, at least in the States, they cannot relegate that decision to contractors. That's what I said in my presentation. Agencies need to have some in-house capability in managing the TAM system. You can always hire a consultant to collect the data. You can hire a consultant to manage the data. but decisions on preventive maintenance, what those maintenance strategies should be, essentially that should come from your internal decision-making process. Certainly consultants can do 80% of the work, but ultimately the steward of the data would be the agency. And that's, I think, at least in the US, it is the agencies that take charge, take ownership of that decision.
Thank you very much.
Maybe somebody believes that the main contractor should do that. So what's the best way, in your opinion, to keep it sustainable maintenance?
Well, again, the issue of contractors, what we are grappling with right now, for example, through ASC, American Society of Civil Engineers, we are grappling with how to build sustainability factors into design, for example, so later contractor can then use that design specs and so on. So I think, from my experience, at least in our work in New Jersey, it's always the agency that should drive that point to the contractor, not the other way around.
Thank you, Professor Maher.
Yeah.
My apologies due to the time limitation. We'll stop here. I know there are several questions. But at the end, we would like to thank you again, Professor
Sure. Thank you much.
Ali Maher, for your presentation.
Thank you. Thanks. I think I'm going to... okay, which one is Doctor's presentation? Okay, it's here. Thank you. Thank you.
Have some. Our second keynote speaker is Dr. Khalid Mehdi, and the title of his presentation is Sustainable National Infrastructures, Opportunities and Challenges. Dr. Khalid Mehdi is the Secretary General of the Supreme Council for Planning and Development and is the Program Director of the Country Plan Action Program of UNDP in Kuwait. He served several high-level government boards, committees, such as the Public Authority for Industries, the Kuwait Institute for Scientific Research, the Public Housing Welfare Authority, and Kuwait Master Plan 2040, in addition to other committees. You have a long CV. MashaAllah. Since he assumed his current post, Dr. Mehdi established proudly the Kuwait Public Policy Center with the Notch Unit, KPAL, and the National Knowledge Economy Center, NKEC, and initiated the new Kuwait Outreach Public Campaign, Kuwait Sustainable Development Award, and Kuwait Distinguished Woman Award, KWWA. He received the People First Leader GCC HR Award in 2018. He served as an advisor for the Kuwait University Strategic Office in 2005 and the Minister of Planning and Development Affairs Office in 2013. In the private sector, Dr. Mehdi chairs the region's first construction waste recycle plant and co-found a consultancy services firm besides sitting on several boards on local and regional industrial corporations. In academia, and for consecutive 15 years, Dr. Mehdi was an associate professor in the College of Engineering and Petroleum at Kuwait University, where he taught many different engineering and management courses, received the Best Teaching Award, co-authored more than 65 publications, journals, conferences, chapters, technical reports, and others. Dr. Mehdi is a graduate of the University of Toronto and holds a PhD degree from Northwestern University in Chemical Engineering. Dr. Khalid, the ground is yours. تفضل.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I've been instructed to give the presentation in English because it's an international forum. Honestly, Professor Ali Maher dragged me to my old time in academia. When I saw your heat maps, fluid dynamics, solid dynamics, all of the very nice finite element analysis, the regression, it get me, honestly, I wish to go back again. And will be very soon. Honestly, the presentation given by the keynote speech by Professor Maher shed the light on a lot of interesting aspects. Assets management is one, the use of AI, the integration of all the infrastructure, and also get to my attention the deterioration of the infrastructure in the USA, which require a lot of investment. I like his answer that you require 10 times the cost if you are upgrading an old infrastructure, if you compare it to building a new virgin infrastructure. His presentations will save me a lot of talk because he shed the light on the component of resilience, components of sustainability, and the main global challenges as well local challenges. Here in Kuwait, we are not a country which is a virgin land that require a build of a super new infrastructure, except in the new developments area, but we do have an infrastructure since the 50s which need an upgrade. This upgrade is costly, it's not easy, hard to assess, and hard to proceed. My talk today will be divided into 3 main parts. The first part is I want to shed the light about Kuwait Vision 2035 in New Kuwait. The reason is there are a lot of visitors from outside of the country, and I'm sure they are very much interested to know about the Kuwait Vision 2035. Also, I've been asked many times, even by our local, what is the Vision 2035 and where are we heading? Is it new? No, it is not. It's been announced 2006 by His Highness. In 2010, we have the first Kuwait National Development Plan. The second one was in 2015, and we are now working toward creating the 2020 to 2025 plan. In a nutshell about Kuwait, so people get used to the fact of what are the real challenges of the country and what are the capitals of the country. We are a yellow country. There is no single fresh water in the country that we depend on for use. So 17,818 kilometers square, the whole land, 0 wetland. Boundaries, they go 475 kilo. The coastline is quite long for a small country, almost a 500 kilometer. Our population is divided into 1/3 of Kuwaitis, 1/3 of non-Kuwaitis, Arab, and the rest is non-Kuwaiti, non-Arabs. The natural resources of the country mainly is the oil and gas reserve, the 3rd largest, and the most important, the solar energy. And if you would like to enjoy our sun, I invite you to visit end of July, maybe beginning of August. There are 4 major capitals that Kuwait has, which make us a bit distinct from other countries, whether in the region or in the Arab world. The first one, we have a very youthful population. Our human capital is at moderate growth rate, roughly 2 to 3%. Our human capital basically are in the age between 15 and 2035, making Kuwait a very youthful country and putting a lot of challenges on the job creation for the future. The second one, we have a geographical capital. We are at the northern part of the Arabian Gulf. This part is a junction between the maritime and the landline at this part. This junction used to be a trading hub, and I will shed the light on why we are heading on the trading hub concept. The third one is natural capital, as I mentioned, so the crude oil as well as the gas and the solar energy. I want to add another capital, which many people usually see it as de facto for the country. It's an institutional capital. Kuwait, being in this region, has a constitution. In the 60s, it's a country with institutions, a lot of layers. Also, it has a visionary leadership and independent legal system. That institutional capital is considered very valuable in the country. If you take these four capital, I would like to shed the light right now on the evolution of the country. So you understand where are we heading as a part of the Kuwait Vision 2035. If we look at Kuwait at the ancient time, the oldest ruins we have in Kuwait is dated 6,500 BCE, which is quite an old ruins located at the northern part, more or less connected to the Mesopotamian under the civilization of Ubaid. Now, at this age, or at this time, Kuwait used to be a trading hub between the southern part of the Arabia as well, connected to the Mesopotamia and the Sumer. 4000 BC, Delman civilization, also it was a trading hub between the Mesopotamia and the Indus, known as Pakistan now, the Indus Valley. Later on the 600 BCE, also we have another signs of a trading hub being associated to the Babylonian Empire. On the 200 BC, also there are shown the Greek influence in Failaka especially as a trading hub. Until the Ottoman Empire actually blocked the road in 1450s, changing Kuwait from a trading hub to mail post. The country used to be part of the silk and the spice routes. This slide, I just want to show that the trading hub that many of the Kuwaitis, as well as people from the outside, international, look at the country due to its geographical location as being a trading hub throughout ancient history. If we go back now to some of the wording which I found by the British Commercial Agency in Basra, self-appointed Samuel Manstey, he said, we came to Al Grain, which is the name of Kuwait that time port, and it's actually linked the exports of India to Baghdad, to Elbow, and to Europe. Until that day, if we look at this area, I mean this time period, the old Kuwait used to be a quite sustainable, resilient country. For 400 years, the country has a very small government, a very large private sector. Most of the major economic activity goes into trading, barrel fishing, as well as small and medium enterprises. And this is why many family names in Kuwait, they actually carry names of professions. They are known now as the small, medium enterprises. The major characteristic of this economy, it was a very small economy, but very productive. The productivity was very high. Government administration was very small. They only care about the security, internal and external, and doing some administration work. But basically, the whole economy was private sector led. Yes, it is small, but was sustainable, and it lived throughout about 400 years in that system. Modern Kuwait, upon the discovery of oil, the post-oil era, the country start to have other major activities. The most economic activities are the petroleum industries and the investments. This is why the two main organization entity are the KIA, which is the Kuwait Investment Authority, and the Kuwait Petroleum Corporation. We are proud in Kuwait to be the first international sovereign fund in the world. And all the other sovereign funds come later. We are very much proud of this legacy, and this legacy actually protected the country and was part of the liberation of the country during the Iraqi aggression. Some of the general characteristics of modern Kuwait. Yes, we are blessed by prosperity. Yes, we are blessed by modernity. However, we get into what we call the Dutch disease or the trap. The trap is we have a bloated public administration. It's quite huge. And the public employment is becoming like a form of wealth distribution. A very small private sector, and even this private sector, depending also on the government, the overall lower productivity of labor is becoming obvious and obvious. When you are overstaffing your government entities, you are definitely having a drop in the effectiveness of the government. So what is the theory of change? How we get out from this trap? We are a country with a legacy, and we have practices from the past. These practices, as I mentioned, they are sustainable, they are resilient, and they can be used. So let's take these practices. We add to it the modern sources of prosperity. And if we do this little equation, I'm being in an engineering forum, so this is the simplest equation I can give here. It will be equal to sustainable, prosperous future. That's led me to the vision of His Highness. The vision of His Highness is targeting this sustainable, prosperous future. His Highness said, okay, our legacy is, we used to be a trading hub, 4,500 BC before, so we did it before, it was in the old time, let's go back to it. It's more sustainable to move to our genuine, in our DNA, in the Kuwaiti DNA, is to go back to having a trading hub. Next, he mentioned clearly that it's a private sector leading economy, leadership, focus on the human capital, changing the role of the government, and I want to just highlight a relevant a statement by His Highness related to this conference, a balanced development providing adequate infrastructure, which will be supporting for the enabling government leading the to let the private sector lead the economy. That gets me into what are the pillars of Kuwait, of a new Kuwait vision. The new Kuwait vision has 7 pillars. Let me go through them one by one. The first one is as an effective public administration, with changing the role of the public administration of the government being operating 90% and more of the economic activities in the country to more of much less to be given to the private sector as to be leading the economy. So it is not the role of the government to operate. The role of the government is to regulate, to monitor, to make policies, effective policy, evidence-based policy. If we look at that, set of a program was being initiated in order to get to this target. We are, until now, we are far away from achieving this target. However, there are programs being done. You cannot get an effective public administration without an anti-corruption policy and practices. To have a better new master plan, up to the 3rd master plan, we have deviation from the strategies and the master plan. So the 4th master plan, which is ongoing right now, to be aligned with the vision of Kuwait, the digital government transformation, as well as institutional governance. These are programs, are part of the Kuwait National Development Plan. If we go to the next one, which we consider very, very important and very essential, is the human capital development of the country. It is what we call a creative human capital. And this is part also of the DNA of the Kuwaitis. Kuwaitis survive all of these years because of three things. They believe in sustainable practices, they were creative, and they were resilient. So these are three major characteristics of Kuwaitis living in this geographical area. So creativity used to be the driving force of the country development. Now, until recently, our human capital index is becoming very low. We are moving toward improving it through development in the human capital aspect. How we do that is by aligning education to the labor market and to consider inclusion of special needs as well as empowerment of women. Number three, which is how the economy should look like. The economy will be more of a private sector led. This can be done through four major programs: public-private people partnership, the foreign direct investment, as well as the small, medium enterprises, and the privatization. Why? In order to initiate the innovative approach to knowledge economy. Another major pillar is the infrastructure. We look at the infrastructure in the Kuwait National Development Plan from two aspects: the logistical one and the ICT one, and the energy. So we look at the energy infrastructure, part of it, the ICT and the logistical, and I will shed more light in the presentation on this program. Now, quality healthcare, the focus right now is on health promotion, more of promoting health rather than curing and using medical treatment. The basic principle goes into attacking non-communicable diseases, which are very well known in Kuwait: the hypertension, diabetes, cardiovascular, and the asthmatics, diseases. If we look at the sustainable living environment, which is related also to the infrastructure, the focused program are the eco-cities, renewable energy, as well as the integrated waste management. And the video being presented at the beginning of this forum, they show some part of our renewable energy power station. Now, why we do that? We want to get to international positioning. And the international positioning by setting this target, top 35% in all global competitive indices. What we are presenting in the Kuwait National Development Plan, we are moving the indicators from local indicator to international indicators. So we measure our success by the international indicator. If our indicators are down, therefore we are failing in some area. If our indicators are going up, mean there is some success in this area. And what you cannot measure, you cannot manage. That's the important idea. The roadmap to 2035 goes into several stages. The first 5 years basically spent on legislative and legislature's activity. The second 5 were building infrastructure. You can see a lot of infrastructure being built during the 15-20 period. Moving to 2025, it's more of a private sector engagement. To 25-30, more of a knowledge-based economy. At least there are some building done on the way in order to get to this knowledge-based economy. Therefore, we end toward more of a smart Kuwait based on the Kuwait Master Plan. Let me go through some of the, let me focus right now on the infrastructure pillar. The first thing, we have an alignment with the Sustainable Development Goal of the United Nations. As you know, Kuwait is also participating in the SDG implementation. which is Agenda 2030. This agenda came on September 2015. Our Kuwait National Development Plan was out on January 2015. So we came before, and this is why Kuwait Vision is 2035 and the agenda is 2030. And we have nothing to do with deciding the 2030. It's more of a global agreement on the agenda. One of the things that we need to work out is to make this alignment. And this alignment is done through the national plan, through the SDG 9, as we call it, the ninth goals of sustainable development. Now, let me give you an idea about what are our mega projects and where is most of the money being spent of the public investment on the national plan. Most of it goes to definitely to the oil and gas sector, our strength point, and more further development in this gas and oil sector into more value proposition in the what we call it, the value chain of petroleum. Introducing more projects into the petrochemical industry and doing the vertical as well as the horizontal integration. Now, if we look at the energy, which constitute about 90%, urban development of roughly 10%, and logistical 17%, meaning that mostly 36% they go into infrastructure. This is the investment we are allocating as a government into upgrading and developing a new infrastructure for the country. Major projects. I just want to go through some of the major projects. There is the waste treatment, and it is being done through PPP, public-private partnership. The waste to energy as well, also the airport, the T2 terminal, T4 has been done, the seaport, Mina Mubarak has been also mentioned. From the ICT perspective, we look at the landline, its own privatization, as well as the fiber optics. Also the energy, we have the Shigaya, one of our major projects on the introduction of solar energy contribution to electrical production. His Highness' vision was to have 15% of the electrical production to be done to be taken from the sun, from the solar energy. This will give quite a big challenge for the country to develop a 4,500 megawatt solar power production. Now there are other power stations more being introduced from a public-private partnership. What I want to shed the light here on is the Kuwait National Development Plan. Look at infrastructure from two angles. One angle is, which is purely public investment, which is allocated budget by the Ministry of Finance, and this is to be spent mostly on roads. There are other infrastructure projects which public-private people partnership is introduced. And one of the first one is Shamal Zor. This is a very important power station plan concept. The country actually started a public-private partnership company. However, what is missing is the people introduction, which will be an IPO coming soon until they clarify some of the legal issues. Once this being materialized and becoming a successful model, for more and more power station through public-private partnership being looked at. Another public-private partnership is the waste to energy as well as the waste treatment. So if we look at the investment of the private sector into the infrastructure, has been introduced in most of the projects other than the roads. The whole idea about the roads is we don't have tollways until now in the country, but I do believe that this will be an option for the private-public partnership. I'm having another 5 minutes to conclude. Thank you, Doctor. In a nutshell, the infrastructure program consists of these four components, the logistical one. A lot of talk being done on the logistical part, and I do believe there are other speakers will be talk about it. But I want to mention something about the ICT infrastructure. The ICT infrastructure is becoming a mandatory in Kuwait National Development Plan for one simple reason. If we want to move to a knowledge-based economy, to digital government, to digital economy, to digitization, we need the proper ICT infrastructure in the country. Also, there is a very important project Professor Ali Maher actually mentioned in one of his slides. It is not yet materialized, my dear, which is the Northern Gulf Gateway. So the Northern Gulf Gateway, it has been an initiative by CITRA, and this is a very important project because it's also related to the concept of hub in the country. What are we doing? Just want to mention one thing. The Kuwait National Development Plan, the 5-year plan, is a set of policies. The annual plans are a project. As we speak today, the government engagement in the plan is much higher than the private sector. However, the vision of His Highness is to get more private sector involvement and leadership. These are the challenges that we have basically on the ICT infrastructure. This is why we are moving more into integrating the new concept with the Kuwait 4th Master Plan, as well as to develop better broad maps for the digital government. Again, for the land, sea, and air, a lot of people ask about the railroad, the metro, all of these nice projects being mentioned. However, they've been announced by the government long time ago. The Kuwait Master Plan will answer some of these questions related on how is the new layout of the railroad will be. We are looking also at the further capacity for mass transportation in order to ease the stress on the road, as well as to build better capacity. Again, for the water and energy, as I mentioned, renewable energy. I mentioned water introduction through RO and the use of the solar energy. What are our measures? What are the main challenges? Is to improve the GCI, is to have the proper strategic direction and the engagement of all the proper government entities and the willingness of the private sector to invest through a proper legislative system in order to improve our KPIs or the global competitive indices based on the World Economic Forum. These are targeted. And if you want to look, I'm sorry, but this has been Arabic slide. What I am targeting with this presentation is only to shed the light on some of the infrastructure projects, policy, direction, and how the Kuwait National Development Plan and New Kuwait is being outlined. Thank you very much. And I hope I stick to my time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Khalid Mehdi, on your informative presentation. You gave us a good information about the future plans of Kuwait. Now, since we have time limitation, we will take 2 questions, 2 short and precise questions.
I've been chopped in the presentation into almost half, because the other half will be more into challenges. And let me go through the challenges in answering your question, as well as back to your second remark. There are a lot of internal and external challenges on the implementation of the plan. But before we do that, we have to make sure that our targets are reasonable and make sense. So this is why the Kuwait National Development, the second one and the third one, will be more of a focused plan, other than claiming that we can implement 300 plus policies. So we are doing this corrective measure in order to create a focus and momentum. Challenges. Number 1 is the institutional capacity and the individual capacity. The individual capacity, because the education is not aligned well with the labor market, we are having issues with regarding to our achievement of this strategic project. So, the first answer on the individual capacity goes into basically is the duty of the education institution to be definitely aligned with the labor market need, not government job. It is about the private sector jobs that need to be very well aligned with the education output and outcome. What are we doing right now? Most of the institutional and academies in the country, they do what we call push policy. They throw the graduates and they want the labor market to take them nicely and happily. The private sector will not be able to pick them up because they are not either needed or not up to the skills and the standard. Therefore, the public sector will need to be shocked with them. So that's number one. The second, another question, another challenge is the institutional capacity. Our governance and our government structure does not allow a smooth transition and implementation of a project. Another major challenge. This challenge is being slowly becoming lesser and lesser. However, it is still another challenge being there. Why? Because the government is already overpopulated and overstaffed, and the number of decision makers are so many. Therefore, we should cut short the decision-making process and be more focused on a high-speed direction. The third challenge, which is very important, is the legislative challenge. Most of the legislators, they are not technically looking at the legislation and the laws. They are basically looking at it from a socio-political, economic form, which is a very inefficient way of creating a proper legislation. So these are the major three challenges in the implementation of the plan.
Thank you. We are trying to be optimistic.
دكتور حسن ماسكني عدل.
One last question. Last question, Dr. Walid Eid. طلال بس precise, please. Dr. Walid, if you introduce yourself again.
Walid Eid, Kuwait University. Dr. Khalid, thank you for your presentation. You mentioned in your presentation that 45% of the investment will be pumped in the gas and oil sector, and around 36% will be pumped in the infrastructure. That's a huge investment from now until 2035. Is there any asset management system will be implemented in the plan?
This one is not working. It's not safe.
This is all. It's not SBC.
Yeah, okay. البوس هنا وايد tough يعني. We have to follow the rules.
Or he can copy the file.
Yes and no, sir. There are scattered efforts I can see in some of the entity. I can see some of the entity. Now let me take asset to a lesser level. Nowadays I can see more entity interested in facility management. This is a good step toward creating a culture of understanding the importance of facility management. Asset management at the highest level in the country is being part of the requirement in the Kuwait Master Plan 4. We do not have a proper blueprint for the country on the asset management level, but we do have a scattered, siloed effect.
Okay.
To give you an idea, for example, the GIS in Kuwait is being scattered between different entities. And part of the asset management, you need to have a unified central GIS in order to make sure that your data is being unified and speaking the same layer and the same language. But we do in Kuwait more of a siloed asset management. We do not have a proper integrated approach. The country is very small, which I don't see a reason why not to have a proper asset management. This is why we introduced it in the Master Plan 4, which we are hoping to be finalized very soon.
بعد البحر researcher, Kuwait Institute for Scientific Research. Thank you, Dr. Khalid. You are drawing a parallel between the merchant in old Kuwait, how they have built small and moderate Kuwait when we have a smaller government. My question to you, what sort of KPIs you have seen in the private sector now who have led the second master plan and have made a mess? And what is the sort of KPIs you've seen in the private sector where they don't have, or what they don't invest in those young engineers or those young Kuwaitis, the graduates, and they don't find them employable, and they don't even care to invest in their training? Thank you.
تفضل. ايه تفضل تفضل.
tough boss, huh? ما يتحكى. To be honest, upon the consultation with the private sector during the development of our diversification policy, we found the private sector unwillingness for investment, unwillingness to attract more Kuwaitis, unwillingness into playing a major role. Reason, there are reasons, a very good one. The first reason is the government interfere on how the private sector do the implementation. We want the government to do more of regulating and monitoring on a proper scale. Intervening, it will cause a lot of delay, as we can see in many mega projects in the country. Regardless of the strength of the private sector, it is the role of the government to force the private sector to even be better. I have to tell you one thing, through my job in these last 3 years, they all look at the counterpart. The private sector want to maximize their profit, and this is a legitimate reason. And I want, as a government, to maximize the benefit for the public by optimizing the public investment. So the counterpart need to be smart, capable, and understand the language. Being in the academia, in the private sector, and in the public sector, there are 3 different languages spoken. Private sector speak a language, the academia speak another, as well as the public sector speak a different language. What we are looking for in the Kuwait National Development Plan, that everybody need to be synchronized for the sake of the development of the country.
Thank you very much.
والحديث بقية الدكتور حسن مو مخلينا.
Thank you very much. خلاص. So at the end, I would like to apologize for not taking more questions. It was a very interesting session. We would like to thank our 2 keynote speakers, Professor Ali Maher and Dr. Khalid Mehdi. Thank you again. And since we are behind the schedule, the second session will start immediately. I would like to introduce Professor Haytham Al-Babidi, moderator for the second session. تفضل.
Assalamu alaikum. I think we can say Masa al-Khair. I would like to welcome you in the second plenary session in this conference. I think we have a problem in time management, so we will try our best. I don't promise, but we will try our best to finish before 1 o'clock. Our first keynote will be by Professor Farhad Ansari. Professor Farhad Ansari is Professor of Civil Engineering, University of Illinois at Chicago. He is acknowledged as the pioneer in applying optical fiber sensors for structural health monitoring, and has consulted on and designed structural monitoring systems for bridges around the world. Professor Ansari is currently the editor-in-chief of the Journal of Civil Structural Health Monitoring. I would like to welcome Professor Ansari without any delays. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I also like to thank the members of the Scientific and organizing committee, and thank the audience for being here. With that, I'd like to start my presentation. Let me begin by mentioning to you that the previous speaker, Professor Maher, spoke about asset management. And one of the items he indicated was the fact that as long as one has good data, then the process in maintaining and doing your asset management would work. So data is important, and I'm coming from that point of view. Now, why structural health monitoring is important is for many reasons. One is that if you look at the history since maybe 1200 all the way to now, 2019, we see that more bridges and tunnels have failed and collapsed with fatalities than we could think of. The other issue is with the asset management, where we could use the data for maintaining our infrastructure system. And last but not least is that even though we think that we are well advanced in structural analysis and structural design, we still don't know as much as we think we do. So by monitoring and determining how our structures feel, then we could advance that art and do more precise analysis. One of the questions that we could ask each other and ourselves is how structures fail. Is this due to one reason or a combination of several reasons? And I have listed a number of them that I encountered and thought about. There are probably some, such as the SCOVR, that I have not mentioned here, but the list is many. And amongst these lists, one could consider construction and design errors, corrosion, fatigue, as a number of issues that would create dangerous situations. But almost in all the cases that I have encountered in my experience is that bridges and tunnels and buildings don't fall and don't fail because of one reason. There's usually a combination of a number of reasons. And for that, I try to provide some examples. The first one that really changed the way we look at maintenance and inspection of bridges in the United States was the collapse of the Silver Bridge. The Silver Bridge crossed over Ohio River, connected two states together, and it was called Silver Bridge because of the special paint that they used on it. And the bridge served for 40 years, and all of a sudden it collapsed. Now, this bridge is a cable-stayed suspension bridge, and it had a special design where the cables were not intertwined, pre-stressing type of cables. They were I-bars, steel I-bars, that they were connected together by bolts. And in 1967, the bridge collapsed all of a sudden with a number of fatalities and injuries. I've tried to show you what is the I-bar section that was used on that bridge as cable. And also you will see the mechanism how these I-bars are connected. So really the life of that bridge is dependent on individual bolts connecting the I-bars. And the bridge did not have any other redundancies, so the weakest link was the chain, the I-bars. And throughout the years, the bridge had corrosion cracks. One of the I-bars had a good-sized corrosion crack that it eventually increased in size and caused the collapse of the bridge. The one thing that I forgot to mention there was that the last time that bridge was inspected was in 1951. The bridge collapsed in 1967. At that time, the US, we didn't have the biennial bridge inspection program. And since then, the rules were changed and we ended up with having inspection of the bridges every 2 years. Next topic is a tunnel that is considered, its collapse was one of the deadliest tunnel collapses in the history of Japan. And this is the tunnel that is near Tokyo, is about a few kilometers from Tokyo. And the collapse of this tunnel was related to the concrete linings, a number of them. Each one weighed 1.2 tons. And we had a few kilometers of this tunnel that all these linings fell on cars. A number of people, individuals, were crushed. And also by these falling of tunnel linings and collapse, these cars were set on fire and a lot of smoke injuries as well. It took a few months to bring that tunnel back together, and the cause of the collapse was not totally understood because they were visually inspected, but the concrete was aging. And later, after a lot of studies on the material properties that took about 1 year, they found out that although they did not detect any major cracks, but they had detected through the experiments the micro cracks. Also, a number of anchor bolts that were used as secondary connecting elements of these linings were missing. This is the collapse of I-35 westbound bridge, which connects the state of Minnesota to Wisconsin. And its collapse in 2007 was very drastic. It involved many cars and many individuals that fell into their death in the Mississippi River. And this bridge at the time of collapse was under repair. The cause of this collapse was, following major studies, was determined that one of the gusset plates was not thick enough. There was a design error, and that was considered the primary cause, although one would imagine that the bridge that remained in service for 40 years, just the gusset plate, the thickness probably would not have been the cause. And other related issues were the fact that over the years when the bridge was in service, concrete surface layers were added to the pavement, and the shear weight, the additional weight of that concrete lining added about 20% more dead load to the structure. And during the rehabilitation, the heavy construction equipment were placed in the center span at the most vulnerable section of the bridge. And it was determined that the combination of all these factors, plus the fact that during the inspection it was all visual, there were no sensors involved, this additional strain at the gusset plate that would have been indicating that the gusset plate was not designed the right way would have alerted the authorities about the bridge collapse. Now, this is a bridge that I spent the past 6 months studying it in Italy, and this collapsed the Polsevera Creek Morandi's bridge collapsed in August of 2018. And it's Ricardo Morandi, at a time, he designed a number of bridges that they look like this. a couple of them in Italy, and then some others in South America. And right now, this bridge is under litigation because of this collapse, and the reason I went there was because of the being an unbiased referee studying this. But because the collapse was very horrendous, it was difficult to get enough data over a short period of time. So I spent 6 months on this bridge. And one of the first things that we realized is that the location of the bridge is in Genoa, in that corner where I circled the region. And it's near a lot of factories and steel mills with chemicals and vicinity of the Mediterranean with corrosive environment. And collapse of this bridge really created a lot of issues even when I was traveling between Turin, which is in the northern side, to Genoa. That's a major highway where everyone from Italy goes to France and coming back from France, and all the northern section of the Italy are connected to the south part. Now, this bridge, once we took the data, took the concrete elements and reinforcements to the fallen sections to a laboratory in Switzerland, we found out that really the design of this bridge was not the right way for this region. First of all, the bridge was designed with not as many cable stays. As you can see that on those 3 pylons, each pylon has really 2 sets of cable stays. The second thing that we can observe is that these cable stays are designed in a saddle way. Now we don't design saddle cable stay. That means that the cable goes from one side over the pylon, comes to the other. So if one side is cut, the whole system is off. The very important other item about these cable stays are that they are unusual. They are shaped as hollow tubes, and instead of the pre-stressing and post-tensioning elements, it involves a lot of pre-stressed concrete. Basically, they poured concrete in there and put 2 sets of pre-stressing strands, one during construction to aid to keep the structure as a temporary decks, and the other for the live loads. And this structure was definitely prone to corrosion as the first thing that comes into mind with a structural engineer experience with some bridges. So all these elements were wrong, but not only corrosion could be a culprit, because the bridge also served for 40 or 50 years, similar to the other collapses. And when it collapsed, it killed a lot of people and injured many. And really the reason for this, after studying the cables, after getting through the pieces and sending them to the laboratory, basically the majority, 80% of the strands were corroded. One could put a chisel and move the cables and they would move up and down. But the second reason that was the culprit was the traffic. In 1967, when the bridge was put in service, the average daily traffic on that bridge was 20,000 cars. And then by the time of its collapse in 2018, the average daily traffic was 140,000 cars per day. And those 2 combinations, I call it unofficial because we haven't given our report, but those 2 combinations, in our opinion, was the reason for collapse. Now, these are some examples, but when we want to do civil structural health monitoring or put sensors on our structures and go through asset management, we will have some challenges where the aeronautics, aircraft industry did not have. One is that our structures are large. I look at around Kuwait City and I see all these marvelous buildings, and these are all large buildings. The other thing is that we have, when we place sensors to monitor large structures, we have to place a lot of sensors. And when we have a lot of sensors, we also get a lot of data. And processing of a data is also a challenge. So we have to find ways and methods and sensors and analysis techniques where we don't collect a lot of data, and when we collect a lot of data, we should have automated systems so that we could manage the processing and find out what we want to find out as an engineer, as opposed to a lot of curves and data. So one of the techniques, I described one of the techniques that we use. There are several other techniques that we use. One is that we use optical fiber sensors, and for very good reasons. One is that we could do the job of placing the sensors much cheaper labor-wise because it requires skilled labor. But we do it much cheaper because these sensors are distributed. So we place lines of optical fibers and we can collect the data on one cable as opposed to placing a lot of cables and sensors on bridges. And other properties are given here, but other properties relate to accuracy and immunity to noise, electrical noise, and everything else. There are many different fiber optic sensors in use now. I just talked about there is one technique that is based on discrete sensors put on one line, and one other technique is just attaching an optical fiber cable into kilometers of infrastructure. And if we do some lab experiment, let's say we have a beam and we place it under 4-point bending, attach a fiber optic to it, and create some cracks, artificial cracks, what we see after we place the loading on the bridge, we're supposed to see this trapezoidal strain diagram or moment over EI diagram, and we will see that at the location of the cracks, even though the cracks were very small, created a strain of 200 microstrain, we can see at the location of the cracks directly the intensity of strain, telling us that that's the location where you have cracks. And this is just by one optical fiber. So it's a great technology because you can use this optical fiber on a very large structure, large building or bridge, or 40 kilometers of pipeline, and then you can detect the high pressure points or crack locations. I'll give you some examples about applications of that, but then I also go to that discrete sensors. There's sensors, we call them FPG. We can make them any type of sensors, measure tilt, displacement, cracks, and then we can connect it all in one line and monitor our system. So there are two different systems. One of the systems we use on a bridge, this is a major bridge in US going from Canadian border all the way through US and going to Canada. It goes over the Kishwaukee Bridge, which is a large Kishwaukee River, which is a large river in Illinois. It's a 5-span bridge. It consists of 2 bridges, a north and a south span. And the problem with this bridge was that it was one of the first segmental box girder, segmental concrete constructions. Each box was about 7 feet. And at the time they built it, when they glued this system and then post-tensioned them, there was problems with the epoxy. The epoxy never dried, and the sections create, at the keyways, they create a lot of cracking. So this bridge was repaired later in the 1980s by creating external post-tensioning on the bridge. And recently, about 3 years ago, the truck drivers, and there's a lot of truck traffic on that, we never have a moment of without having trucks. And what happened is that the truck drivers start hearing noise as they entered and exited the bridge. So what we decided to do, and the visual inspections really didn't give them any clues about cracks, because after post-tensioning, the bridge was very much together. And what we did, we placed a distributed sensor over the entire length of the bridge. As you can see, the bridge is pretty long, and we placed a distributed sensor. We should have placed more, because now we found there are many more cracks, but we just placed it in one location. And as you can see, the fiber optic is very, very small. And we did a load testing on the bridge. And with the load testing, we wanted to determine if there are any cracks that were not visible by naked eye, regular inspection. If we could detect them, by these sensors. So we had trucks, and we used actually 4 trucks, and with loads that are specified here on the slide. And we placed the trucks on every individual span. It's a 5-span bridge. So we placed the trucks on each individual span and made measurements. What you see, the noisy data, is from the sensor, because the bridge is very stiff, and it doesn't budge. But at the location of the truck, you see some peaks, and those peaks are due to the truck axles, not any cracking. But amongst the noise, you will see some peaks, some other peaks at certain locations. This would not indicate that there are definitely cracks at those locations, because they have to be cross-checked. So we also moved the truck to the 2nd span. Again, you will see the location of the truck axles, but at same points that we discovered strain intensities, and some other points we see, again, additional strain intensities. As we move on with the truck and we go over across the whole bridge, and we perform this test after midnight because there was a heavy truck traffic there in that location. As we move on, we can see the strain intensities along this bridge. And finally, at the last span, we see even a strain reversal. That means that there was probably an active crack there that it opened and closed. When we kept the trucks on the locations where we discovered that there were strain intensities, and we went to the same locations, we discovered hairline cracks, and we used a marker to mark it here. But these were at the same locations where we had discovered the strain intensities, not visible by naked eye. The danger to this kind of system was that at the time we didn't detect that there was also water infiltration. Now we are going back to the bridge, but water has already infiltrated through the bridge, and there are also some corrosion. So this bridge has to be monitored further. This is an example of some stadium that we monitored some time back in China. And it's a very, in fact, if one looks at this stadium by a helicopter, it's basically like a moon, first moon, and plus it's a crescent and a star. And we monitored the stadium during construction. The reason for that was that the stadium, one time it had failed due to construction, and the design and the way, the complexity of the truss system was such a way that certain section, when they were unloading, the way they make these, they make a cantilever type of trusses, and then they hold them by temporary structures, and they jack them up. Once everything is welded together, then the jacks are removed and the temporary structures are removed. And during that's the time that we see a lot of collapses. And so that's the finished product, almost. This structure, the types of trusses that they were designed and placed for this structure as the triangular and rectangular sections. And they also had jacks that they kept the structure in place. And each section was built as a cantilever element where it would be connected to the next section and then temporarily held with jacks. And that's where we placed the sensors at the locations where there was most vulnerable at the connecting points for after removal of the jacks, whether there would be strain transfer to the next section or there would not be any strain transfer. If there's not any strain transfer, then that means that the structure was not welded or connected together, or there was a construction error due attachment of these. So removing the jacks was done by unloading, not full removal, so that in case such a thing occurs, then we would not do the job. So overall, we placed 132 individual discrete sensors, which is different from the one that we put in Kishwaukee Bridge. And these sensors, they look like that. They have high resolution They're temperature compensated. And you can see how they were placed on the truss elements and tested during the system. You can see the temporary structures on this stadium. And here you can see that as we removed the jack, unloaded the jacks, you can see that the strain transferred from one section to the other. One section increased in strain, the other one reduced, and so on and so forth. So this structure was actually designed and erected well. Then this is a recent project. Actually, we just implemented this project for Professor Maher's center at Rutgers. So we just actually placed, my engineers placed the sensors last week, and we have some data. Manhattan Bridge is a very old bridge. Older than this would be the Brooklyn Bridge, built in 1883. This bridge was built in 1909. It's a suspension bridge, and it carries a lot of traffic, vehicular as well as the train traffic. And in fact, I would say that over 1,000 trains crosses over this bridge. The vehicular traffic is in the center lanes. The tracks on two sides of the bridge, and because of the dynamic loading and eccentricity of forces applied at the sides of the bridge, we have torsional cracks, and more cracks than one considered. In fact, we haven't finished counting all the cracks. And the way these cracks occur, they occur at the floor beams, approach spans of the Brooklyn and Manhattan, as well as under the railroad tracks. So more cracks that we have thought of, and we decided that for the New York City Department of Transportation, we placed the sensors in certain locations so that they could monitor those sections, and then as needed, we would add to the system. So basically there was a plan where to place the sensors. The locations were in the floor beam. You can see a floor beam construction where we have a lot of cracks at the welded and bolted joints, as well as under the transit tracks where the beams were separated and some of them had cracks. You can see on that left side where we have a sensor, right, that sensor is placed right at the tip of one of the floor beam cracks. And then other cracks under the railroad are shown on the figure on top. And we placed a monitoring system, real-time monitoring system, which is connected to my office in Chicago and my university so that we can monitor this in real time. I just show you one set of data. This is a comparison between a floor beam with no cracks, and you can see that the maximum dynamic strain due to movement of the trains is about 100, let's say close to 120 microstrain. The same type of a connection, floor beam, and you can see the one that has a crack, you will see that is almost 5 times the amount of strain. And also the sensor will indicate that it's the amount of local vibration and crack trying to grow is much more than the other one based on the instability of the strain. So we are interested to see how this grows because there are several floor beams that they have no sensors on them. One of the other projects that we did it 10 years ago for the same city, Brooklyn Bridge, built in 1893, is that the bridge, first of all, it was an innovation at the time because it was a combination of the suspension and cable stays at the time in 1893. It was always also considered a pride for United States because at the time, Europe had all the largest bridges, and this happened to become the largest bridge in the world. And the bridge, once they started checking the approach spans of the bridge, they realized that it had created, these were arches, and they had created a lot of crown cracks. And these crown cracks were, there was a lot of geomaterials in the abutments, and they were losing all those geomaterials. So once we did a visual inspection, a typical approach structure for that bridge, we realized that basically you could see similar behavior in all the structures. Crown cracks and in these walls, and then the supporting wall in between had also cracks. And the owner of the bridge wanted to ask us a question: why these cracks develop, and also what is if these are still growing. We placed sensors, we placed tilt meters, as well as crack sensors and temperature sensors. What we found out that is the crack sensors and our tilt meters on the walls, and we had to put our instrumentation inside because it's a heritage structure and the city didn't let us to transmit the data. But what we found out, and this is the real-time system, the red means that things are growing and the green means that those sections are good. What we found out over a period of monitoring for 1 year, arches, the way they crack at the crown is that the foundation has to move so that the strut point comes out of the equilibrium section. But in New York City, we thought that the bedrock is basically on the surface. You don't have to dig too much to go. So the foundation was pretty good. But what we found out is that from the beginning in 1883, when they started this structure, the structure went through a temperature cyclic motion, where one side was fixed because of the anchorage of the bridge. It was a large 70,000 tons anchorage. And the other side had a truss element, which was a steel truss, and it caused the bridge to move back and forth and caused this movement. And the movement, as you can see, every year leaves some residual stresses, so that means that the building is in a state of movement. 5 minutes? Okay. I think this thing got scared and... Okay, so...
To conclude, please.
Yeah, pardon me? Okay, we go to the conclusion, but there's many other ways that we do measurements. For instance, you can place sensors on the bridge, and you can measure weight of the trucks, and in the conclusion, as we go, and we can monitor everything in real time, and it's not a new technology. All these sensors could be monitored in real time. And in conclusion, after, we have some things about tunnels and everything else, but and long lengths of tunnels, especially when they create water seepage, you may be able to detect those locations with the seepage or cracking, because usually they coalesce and they get together to cause the collapse of the tunnel. So this system goes along kilometers of tunnels and will save the tunnels. And forget about cable-stayed bridges, but the conclusion that I would bring here is that whether we place sensors or we do visual inspection, that we have to look at monitoring of bridges or tunnels or any other type of structure as a structural engineering problem. And we need to use our structural engineering experience just to first try to make educated guesses as to what and in what way this structure would collapse or cause damage. And we usually can find that out from the bridge owners or tunnel owners, as to they know much better about their system, so that based on the interpretation of their knowledge, we could come up with a strategy. And sometimes not getting the fancy results is probably, but finding out about what's happening in a structure is also a good result, because there are many times where we placed the sensor, the owner wanted to make sure that the tunnel is not collapsing or the building is not collapsing, and our sensors kept showing 0 for months. And we knew that, yes, the structure is not moving and it's in good shape. So with that, I conclude. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor. Thank you very much, Professor Farhad, for this very informative presentation, where you addressed challenging problems. and how we monitor before the accident. You allow me to, take the questions at the end of the second talk. Okay, so we will have questions for both presenters.
Okay.
Our next session is addressing a local challenge in infrastructure and sustainability of infrastructure. The title of the presentation is Design and Construction Sustainability Considerations for Sheikh Jaber Al Ahmed Al Sabah project in Kuwait. The presentation will be shared by Engineer May Al Mis'ad and Dr. Arabi Al Shinnawi. Engineer May will handle or will present the environmental aspects of the project. She is head specialist engineer, civil engineer at the Public Authority of Roads. She is currently responsible for our project engineer at the Sheikh Jaber Al Ahmed Causeway project, and she has been handling the project since 2010. I proudly say that she is a graduate of Kuwait University College of Engineering and Petroleum Civil Engineering. Dr. Al-Shannawi is a resident engineer at Dar Al-Handasa. He has been with the international consultant at Dar Al-Handasa for 18 years. He received his PhD from Technical University of Berlin, and he will handle or he will present the construction and structural aspects of the project. So we will start with Engineer Mai. Welcome with me, Engineer Mai.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. First of all, thank you very much for the organizers of this event, Kuwait Society of Engineers and Civil Engineering Department in Kuwait University. I'm so glad to be here with you today. I saw many of my professors, which is, I couldn't see them else. And allow me to give you some information about Sheikh Jaber Al Ahmed Sabah Causeway. I try to squeeze it as much as I can, so I can later, Dr. Arabi will continue the rest of the presentation. I'll go with the project summary and the participants and the location of the project. The title of the project is Design, Build, Completion and Maintain Sheikh Jaber Al Ahmed Al Sabah Causeway Project, which is called Main Link or Sabbiya Link. This is under RA 140. The employer now is PART, which is the State of Kuwait Public Authority of Roads and Land Transport. It used to be MPW before. And it's a design-build contract. So we have a design reviewer and supervision consultant, which is Dar Al-Handasa, associated with SSH and TYL in San Francisco. We have in this project also an independent checker, which is ACOM. And the contractor is a consortium of Hyundai Engineering and Construction as a leader for the offshore works, which is about 80% of the required work for the project. And we have also the combined group contracting company as a local contractor, which is responsible for the onshore part. The designer of this project is Sisra France, and the cost of this project is about $2.6 billion. We started on 3rd of November 2013. And the signing of the contract was 14th of November 2012. And hopefully, inshallah, next week will be the opening ceremony for the project. This layout showing the main link, which is in the red color, and the Doha link. The Doha link is also under the umbrella of Sheikh Jaber Al Ahmed Causeway. So the total length of the Sheikh Jaber is 48 kilometers because it's including both links, the Sabbiya link and the Doha link, which are connected in Shuwaykh area. So the driver is coming from Doha. He has the option either to go to Kuwait City or to Sabbiya. He has the two options. The main link is included also two artificial islands. The first one is about 4 kilometers from Shueikh shore, and the other one is about 8 kilometers from Sabia side. Each island is about 300,000 square meter, and it includes some governmental facilities with the marina, and about each island, half of each island is reserved for the future development. In the middle, we have this navigation channel with the pylon, and I'm so happy today because I saw it in more than, it's mostly in the event. This is a landmark of the event. So this is the navigation channel which allows the ships to go underneath with a clearance of 120 meters and height of 23 meters. It's cable-stayed bridge. And this section showing us the 3 lanes in each side with emergency lane. And the piles, we have about 1,557 piles in the projects, and about 1,200 piers and pier cabs, and we have also about 1,000 precast girders. The project also includes establishing or construction of substations. We have the main substations, and we have 11 substations, 5 substations inside the girder itself, and 6 of them are on land. I'd like to focus a little bit on the environmental consideration on this project. The project environmental scope of works included the regular quality monitoring of the seawater, air, seabed sediments, marine life, and the birds. Also, it was establishment of a new vegetation habitat that, to compensate any expected loss of the shrimp or the tiger shrimp or nursery of the tiger shrimp, which is considered most of the imported commercial shrimp species here in Kuwait. So several monitoring and surveying were carried out to find the best location of the new vegetation habitat, which is about 1 kilometer aside from the South Island. And for that reason, we worked together with the Environmental Public Authority, and the plan was sent for KIPA for their review and approval. It was on May 2013. After their approval, we started to working on the precast artificial reefs, which we can see it here. It's a photo showing at about 1,000 artificial reefs were precasted with a height of 85 centimeters and each side 1.2 meters. The location, we chose the location here because also it has a 3-meter depth of water, which is a perfect place for the nursery of the green tiger shrimp. We can see here some holes on the structure itself to allow the water circulation, and also the structure showing us 3 patches: the dolphin patch, the turtle patch, and the whale patch. Between artificial leaves, we have some spaces. These spaces were filled with natural rocks, each with a minimum diameter of 50 centimeters. This will hold the structure together and increase the growth of marine life. Before installing these artificial reefs, seawoods and sea drops were collected from Khairan area, which is a coastal water, and were developed in in-house aquaculture lab in Sabia, inside the right-of-way of the project. And these sea rods were installed on the artificial leaves before installing them in the final location. Also, that will expedite the growth of the marine life. The period of installations take us from December 2013 up to February 2014, and since then the monitoring and surveying were continuously done for this new vegetation habitat, and thanks God, and it is now considered very successful, and we are so proud that we created a habitat not only for the tiger shrimp but also for marine life. And I'd like to share with you now a short video I extracted. It's only 1-minute video from the videos that we are making them during the monitoring. It's just give us an idea about the marine life and the new vegetation habitat. That's it for me. I'll leave the ground for Dr. Arabi. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to talk about Sheikh Jaber Causeway, which is considered as one of the most important infrastructure projects in Kuwait. Sheikh Jaber Causeway, as Engineer May mentioned before, has a total length of 36 kilometers. The offshore part of the bridge includes an iconic cable-stayed bridge and approach bridges on both sides. My presentation will focus on the design concept and the construction methods of the approach bridges, and also the concept and construction method of the cable-stayed bridge. I will try my best to reduce my presentation to around 10 minutes as requested. As mentioned, so my presentation will focus on the design concept of the approach bridges and the cable-stayed bridge. So when we talk about the design concept, the first task which bridge designers have to deal with is to define the bridge span. This slide shows the relationship between the desired bridge span and the bridge structural system. If the desired bridge span is less than 60 meters, as it is the case for, I would say, more than 90% of the bridges worldwide, then in this case, bridge designers go for continuous spans with uniform deck height. If the desired bridge span is more than 60 meters, then bridge designer will have to go to one of these four configurations, which are normally much more expensive than this configuration. This configuration, which is continuous spans with variable deck height, is suitable for spans between 60 meters to 200 meters. So when we reach a desired span of about 200 meters, this configuration will not be workable anymore, because simply the deck height at the pier location will be more than 14 meters, which is completely out of scale. Therefore, bridge designer in this case will have to shift to one of these three configurations. So this structure, which is called extra dose bridges, this structural system started to be used about 30 years ago, especially in Japan, India, and South Korea, and it is suitable for spans between 100 meters and 200 meters. The cable-stayed bridge configuration is suitable for spans 150 meters and up to 1,000 meters, and the suspension bridge becomes only workable or will be only economical for spans more than 1,000 meters. For Sheikh Jaber Causeway, so this configuration has been selected for the approach bridges. The standard span has been selected as 60 meters, and the deck height has been selected uniform equal to 4 meters. To cross the 120 meter wide navigation channel, so this cable-stayed bridge configuration has been selected. So this slide shows the standard cross-section which has been selected for the approach bridges. So it was selected because the main target and challenge was to deliver the 27-kilometer dual carriageway offshore structure in just 5 years with minimum possible number of marine equipment and best quality. To achieve this goal, 2 key points were considered. The first key point was the use of monobile system with diameter 3 meters to support 60 meter span. So the spans here all are uniform equal to 60 meters. And what we see here, we see the monobile with diameter 3 meters. to show the advantage of the monobile system in comparison with the multi-bile system, I show here a sketch for Bandra Worli Causeway in Mumbai, India, which was designed about 20 years ago. So the causeway of Bandra Worli has 2 cable-stayed bridge and has multiple number of approach bridges. So the standard span of the approach bridges was selected equal to 50 meters. So the causeway has dual carriageway, very similar to the standard section of Sheikh Jabir Causeway. But again, so the difference between the approach bridges in Bandar Worli Causeway and Sheikh Jabir Causeway was the span. The standard span here is 50 meters and here 60 meters. At each location of the substructure, which is based at 50 meters, as I said, so the deck is supported on central single pier, and the single pier is constructed over pile cab, and the pile cab constructed over 4 piles with diameter 1.5 meters each. To construct the pile cab, so coffer dam at each of these locations have to be driven in the soil and followed by casting trim-seal concrete underwater, and then followed by pumping the water out, and the pile cab construction followed this to enable the construction under dry conditions. So the cycle for the construction of 4 piles, pile cab, pier, and pier cab at each of these locations took 30 days, while for Sheikh Jabir Causeway, the system, the monopile system, helped to construct the pile, pier, and pier cab in just 6 days. So this means we have saved at each location 24 days. So this slide shows the advantage of the full span precasting construction method, which was used for Sheikh Jabir Causeway. With this full span precasting method, we could cast 1 girder with full span 50 meters in just 2 to 3 days. And the erection of the girder, which was precast with this method, could be erected in just half day. Had we gone for different method of precasting, so the segments, precasting the segments for 1 span of 50 or 60 meters would have required about 30 days against 2 to 3 days with the full span precasting method. And the erection would have required 7 days against 0.5 days required to be used to erect 1 girder only with span 60 meters with this floating crane, which has a capacity of 2,200 tons, and the self weight of the girder is 1,800 tons. Now I will talk about the concept of the cable-stayed bridge. From the first look, we can see obviously that the configuration of the cable-stayed bridge of Sheikh Jabir is not similar to the traditional cable-stayed bridge configuration, in that we have only one single pylon, and we don't have any back stays. This slide shows comparison between the cable-stayed bridge configuration of Sheikh Jabir Causeway with some other world-known cable-stayed bridges. So this second Hockley cable-stayed bridge in Calcutta, India, it was designed in 1970, and its configuration is typical the standard or the traditional configuration of cable-stayed bridge. It has 2 cable-stayed bridge, and it has backstays. These backstays are connected to stiff support. These backstays play very important role in stabilizing the system of the cable-stayed bridge, because when the main span is loaded by traffic, so these backstays with each connection to stiff support here helps to reduce the deflection of the tip of the pylon in the horizontal direction, and consequently helps also to reduce the down deflection of the middle of the main span. For Sheikh Jaber Causeway, although we don't have these backstays, so the pylon remained very stiff because we have two legs, compression leg and tension leg. This helped to reduce the deflection of the tip of the pylon when the main span is loaded by traffic. So this means these two legs play similar role to the backstays. So Sheikh Jaber Causeway cable-stayed bridge is not the only cable-stayed bridge without backstays. So there are other examples in which the cable-stayed bridges have been constructed without backstays, as this one, this Alamello Bridge, which was constructed in Seville, Spain. So this picture also shows the configuration of Wazirabad Bridge cable-stayed, which was opened for traffic only a few months ago. It has very impressive pylon shape, which has been fabricated in steel and which has kink in the midway between, in the midway of its full height. And it has also reduced number of backstays. This slide shows the construction of the pylon of the cable-stayed bridge of Sheikh Jaber. As we can see here, so the steel elements of the pylon, which can be seen here in this plan view. So this tension leg consists of two circular pipes, each with diameter 1.5 meter. And this front leg steel elements, they are two small steel tubes, each with diameter 0.5 meter. So these steel elements were prefabricated in South Korea and pre-assembled and then dismantled and delivered to the site, and they were installed by the floating crane, and the top elements were installed by tower crane. So after the installation of all steel elements, so the concrete leg, this concrete leg, which is shown here in plan, was cast in 43 segments using self-climbing formwork. This slide shows how the girders of the cable-stayed bridge were erected. The side span girders were erected in the same way as the erection of the girders of the approach bridges. So the main span girders were fabricated in 3 pieces, which were also prefabricated in South Korea, and reassembled also there, and dismantled and delivered to the site, as you can see here. And after all steel elements were installed on temporary piers, and after the installation of all girders, the stay cable installation started. This slide shows the configuration after all stay cables were installed. So the stay cables have been designed with variable number of strands. So the shortest stay cable has been designed with 55 number of strands, and the longest stay cable, which has a length of more than 200 meters, has been designed with 75 strands. So each strand consists of 7 galvanized wires, as you can see here. And the 7 wires are surrounded by wax material, which you can see here in yellow color. And each strand is coated with high-density polyethylene, and the bundle of all strands is placed inside high-density polyethylene tube as well. So the stay cable, which is fabricated out of these strands, and the strands consists of galvanized wire and this wax layer and 2 layers of high-density polyethylene. With this arrangement, we can consider that the stay cable is very well protected against corrosion, and the stay cables can last for a lifetime of 100 years. So last point I want to talk about is this friction damper. Each stay cable is provided with a friction damper, which enhances the behavior of the stay cable under wind loads. They reduce the vibration of the stay cables under wind loads. So with this slide, I come to the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Arabi. I would like to thank our three speakers, Engineer Mai, Professor Ansari, and Dr. Arabi. We have time for maybe 2 or 3 questions for both the presenters. Yes.
Thank you for your presentation. My name is Tarek Mufti. I'm a former consultant with the Council Minister of Kuwait for a mega project. My first question to Mr. Haytham. Professor Ansari, yes. Professor Ansari, my question for you. You mentioned something about the fiber sensors. I came to know that in Japan they provide a sensor of infrared to inspect any kind of earthquake. Can we use the same technology instead of fiber sensor? Use it with replace it with infrared sensors.
Anchorage, in the Anchorage section?
In bridges, I mean. This is what I mean, in bridges.
One reason they use the fiber optic because of the ease of encasement within the cables. Because of its size and the fact that it's not bulgy, they can do that easier. And the other sensors, they could work, but they also add some stress intensity of their own to the cables. A more important reason for using fiber optics is because it's glass, it won't corrode and it doesn't have any polar characteristics with respect to the steel used in the anchorage. And one of the major issues we have with anchorages, as you know, is corrosion. So, but other sensors have worked. I haven't seen many recently, but other type of sensors could work if properly used.
Thank you. My second question for Engineer May, please. You mentioned something about the height of the water, and as you know, we have global warming nowadays, and we have some what we call a tsunami all over the world. Did you consider any kind of high water level in the same area below the bridge? Any kind of tsunami, you know, we are affected now with the global warming, and you can see what's happening in the climate now in Kuwait or other parts of the countries. So I need your elaboration about, is it considered for any kind of tsunami regarding the height and the poles, the structure of the bridge? Thank you.
In general, the bridge is in Kuwait Bay. So the water level is very shallow, especially from near to Shuwaikh area up to Sabiya. We have the maximum depth is about 11 meter under the main navigation channel. So, and it's considered a closed bay or closed water. The studies, yes, it have been considered, and the piles itself and the construction, it was taken into consideration based on those studies.
When I talk about tsunami, I don't mean only the height of level of the water, maybe the waves and the force of the waves on the poles, on the structure.
It was considered during the study of the concept.
So the maximum water level is 3 meters. So, and the seabed level, the maximum is at the cable stayed bridge area. The seabed level has a value of minus 10 meters. So the height of the water and the waves have been considered in the design criteria, but in the Bay of Kuwait, there is no chance for tsunami. So this has not been considered in the design.
You mentioned something that this bridge will remain for 100 years.
Yes.
What kind of sustainable maintenance provided? Is it by the contractor or by third party?
So the maintenance is considered to be carried
I mean
out.
preventive maintenance, not a normal maintenance.
Yeah, so
preventive maintenance.
After the handover of the project from the contractor to the client is supposed to enter into contract with operation and maintenance contractor, which will happen very soon. And the maintenance of the bridge, including also the consideration of bathymetric survey to ensure that the difference in the level of the seabed will remain within the acceptable limits. This is under will be under the scope of work of the maintenance contractor, which will be assigned by the owner, by the bridge owner, the Public Authority of Roads and Land Transportation.
Thank you. Doctor.
I have a simple question. In the design of the bridge, is there a consideration for a mass transit, future rail, anything like that, or that's excluded from the design?
So one of the considerations which has been considered, for example, for the cable-stayed bridge, so one cable-stayed bridge can consider removed. So the stay cables will be monitored regularly, and there is, if there is degradation in the quality of the strands of the stay cable, so there is design consideration for replacement.
This is not the question, Doctor. I think you meant that any possibility to add.
بالعربي هل في مجال لبناء طريق للسكة الحديد أو القطار أو المترو على هذا الجسر أم لا؟
لا هو عفوا فكره ان نحط ريل او سكه حديد لانه هو لو الفيتد اللي هو البريدج، فاذا كانت الفكره انه يحطونه تحت البريدج اتسلف ما راح تصير كليرنس حق اني شيبس والبي تعبر تحته، بلس ان انت راح تكون ككوست بالبدايه، يعني كانت فكره بالبدايات ككونسبت حتى اذكر بالمجلس البلدي طرحوها ايضا لجسر الصبيه او لجسر وسطه الدوحه. فكره انطرحت بس هي بالكونسبت استبعدوها عشان موضوع الكوست.
واهم شيء بالسستينابيلتي هو كان هالشيء هذا انا اعتقد على الجسر.
I don't think so.
Any more questions? Okay.
دكتور عمار صايغ قسم الهندسة المدنية. يعني I would like to congratulate you and congratulate ourselves for this monumental project, which is going to be a landmark in Kuwait. Actually, I'm in structures, but I'm going to ask management and planning a question. Unfortunately, we are used to delay the project for the past 20 years. And when this project came up, we expected long delays in it. But in fact, we were very impressed with the execution time. And you know, the construction, it looked like a breeze to us. You know, when we drive to Shuwaykh, you know, one day we see nothing, the other day we see a pile, third day we see a bridge. So what, you know, the question that I have is that as management issue, you know, what advantages did you have in this project? You know, how do you think it worked out this way, that in a way that we can, you know, use this experience and expertise to work on other projects? The other part of my question is that we are always, you know, as educational institution, we are always interested in the transfer of knowledge and technology. You know, I take a pride with all the team that worked, whether they are from Kuwait or from elsewhere. These are all assets for us. But as far as we are concerned with the Kuwaiti engineers, you know, we are very happy to see you, engineer, as you know, one of the leaders in this project. How do you feel the transfer of knowledge that happened with this, you know, key project to our Kuwaiti engineers? The third one, yeah, with planning, is that a lot of people are asking, you know, they think that because we are in the civil engineering, we know all about the projects in Kuwait. When they see this bridge, they ask us about, is it planned to have Failaka Island included? Like, is there an intersection that will, you know, go into there, or is there part of your plan to expand the bridge to other parts in Kuwait? If it's not, is it easy to implement later on? And thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Doctor. First of all, it's about challenging. And the first day, as you said, everybody here in Kuwait, let's be open. Everybody were put promises, and they thought that project, it will take, instead of 5 years, it will take 10 years. Okay? And from day one, everybody said it will not stick with the $780,750,000 dinars, I mean. Everybody said, no, it will be increased. Wait and see the variation orders. So we put this one in our goal. When I said about the cost, I need to mention something. This projects had 3 variation orders, okay? The first one was the zero cost, zero duration. And the other one is with minus, maybe here the audit bureau can help me because you know it very well. The other one is with a minus 2,010 Kuwaiti dinars. And the third one, because we need to add a telemetry system for the main substation, and it should be done by Ministry of Electricity and Water, but we had to do it on this project to expedite the work. So we tried our best to finish it on time. And you know, it's a daily meeting with the contractor, with the consultant. If we found any obstacles, we directly we're trying to find another way. And the coordination with the authorities, you know, Doctor, in most of the governmental projects, the Dawra al-Mustanidiyya, okay, and the coordination with other authorities, it's really a headache. If you don't follow it on a daily basis and try, honestly, and I'm trying to find any relation, even in private relationships, just to expedite, you know, to follow up the issues and to finish it.
Okay.
And in the end, it will not affect the duration of the project itself. Me, myself, from day one, I'm so proud here. You mentioned the Kuwaiti team. I'm so proud of my team. It's from day one, I have 2 of them here now sitting in their draw. And they are all young engineers. And they just need to encourage them and to leave them learn from this huge project. And I remember also the audit bureau during their visit, they said you have to get the best of the knowledge transfer from the companies and international contractors.
I think this is a very good, excellent conclusion to our session. Encouraging young generation and with sustainable projects in the infrastructure. I would like to join me in thanking again our speakers. And I have a surprise before, closing this session. Thank you very much. Okay, our surprise is that we have now the Qatar World Cup 2022 organization committee. They will brief us on sustainable infrastructures of World Cup 2020 in Qatar. I would like to call on Dr. Medaj Al-Kebi to chair this session. Thank you very much.